Gentlemen, welcome to council for the March the 3rd, 2026. Get right down to business. We have a motion to accept the agenda, moved by White, seconded by Governor. Any additions to the agenda? I just have one for closed session regarding the CAO. So, any further discussion? All those in favor as amended? Opposed? That's carried. Any declaration of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Seeing none. We'll proceed with the minutes of the February 17th meeting, moved by Bill, second by Way. Any areas of questions on that minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of that? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Pickard, can you hear me?
I guess I would. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, you were muted there for.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, thank you. We're down to business rising structure part 07. Denny, anything that you wanted to raise?
That's it, right, there's nothing to add in the report, we have questions on having into it.
Any questions from council? Seeing none, we have a motion to receive the report, moved by, or getting a second by the others. With council township with surface officer report CL 07/2026 business rising to February 17th, 2026 is information. Any further discussion? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Yes.
That's there. Okay, first delegation employment, Rick, Mark for the payroll. And I suspect that Shane, you're going to lead this off and then we'll get right into the master plan.
For you, Mayor to Council, you guys will recall that last year we commissioned Lumex Group to conduct a master fire plan for fire services. Rick and his team came down and interviewed several staff. We put out some surveys and some focus groups. I don't want to get into too much because I'm sure he's going to talk about the process, but without further ado, the actual report has been completed, and this is the presentation of that report. So without further ado, I'll introduce Rick Arnell once again to present the report.
Good, welcome Rick, and we look forward to your report.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Mayor Council, thank you very much for having me here today. Do you have the report to put up or?
Yeah, good.
Aaron? So,
You want the PowerPoint too, Rick, or something?
yeah, if we got the PowerPoint, but if we don't, I brought copies of this, in case.
Was included as an attachment to
Good.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so you sequestered Lumex and our team, and we came down and did a fire master plan. So today we're here to go over just some of the highlights of the plan. I'm sure you're going to get a chance to go through the whole document and look at the document. So what we're going to do is I'll go through the final presentation to council. Next slide, please. So there's my next slide. All right, so guiding principles of the project. So some of the guiding principles, 5 that we really look at are the best fire protection services for safety of firefighters, right? For Southwest Saulsford, that's what we look for. What's the best fire protection services? Safety of the residents. What's the most cost-effective fire protection service? Which fire protection services will help Southwest Saulsford avoid unnecessary future costs? And we let the facts guide us in the recommendations. So over the, I guess it was 4 or 5 months, I worked with the chief and everyone else that I contacted and drove crazy. We used that information to devise the plan. Next slide, please. So The fire marshal's office has set out 3 lines of defense, public education, code enforcement, and fire suppression. So performing the fire suppression part of services, the higher cost of the 3, right? I mean, as we all know, the price of fire apparatus and equipment is astronomical these days. So you need to get your public education and your code enforcement in line, and then your suppression system, that's the bailout for anything that gets missed or something happens. Then the fire suppression takes over. Next slide, please. So our approach and methodology was, we had a startup meeting, council gave a startup meeting, we had stakeholder engagements. Then we went into a very lengthy data collection analysis. We had the draft report, which went to the chief and CAO. And now the final report has been forwarded on to the chief for council's review and public review. Next slide, please. So some of the areas of review we looked at your community and the characteristics. We used your CRA, your community risk assessment. We took an overview of that to see what was going on. Legislation and standards fall in. We adjust, we figure out what you're doing and what you're not doing. Fire service agreements, recruitment, retention, which is the big buzzword with the volunteer paid on call service today. Departmental communications, health and safety, fire prevention, public education, your training, response, the structure of your department, water supply, asset management, and then we looked at your documents and your record keeping. Next slide, please. So I'd like to personally thank everybody that I spoke to during the stakeholder engagement. Everybody was very forthwith and gave me lots of information. And as you can see, the list of people, I may have missed some there, but I had a pretty extensive list of persons I've talked to. And the last one on the bottom right, I had the opportunity to go to all the stations, speak to all the firefighters and all the officers. So that gave me a good understanding of your community. So when I started to write the report, when we wrote the report, we were able to understand everything that was happening. Next slide, please. So the key findings, so next slide, please, is your current strength. So your fire department is committed to training all of its personnel to do NFPA standards, which is now the standard for training firefighters in the province. So you're there and you're making sure they're trained at the high level of preparedness and professionalism. The department's staffed by volunteers and they're very dedicated people, contributing their time and effort needed to protect your community. And another strength is the level of cooperation between Southwest Fire and any neighboring departments and emergency services. You have a great mutual aid and automatic aid system working here, and that's wonderful to see because, as we know, we can't just rely on ourselves. We need to rely on our neighbors and friends to help us out in time of need. Next slide, please. Your current challenges. So decentralizing inconsistent document practices. There was some documents that it was hard to find. So you need to kind of look at trying to streamline that. Limit availability of resource of water. So and that's no surprise to anyone sitting at this table. I'm sure you understand that. It's difficult for the department to attract and retain volunteers, which is a very standard thing you're hearing today throughout the province of Ontario because of the training requirements and those kinds of things, and what's required of firefighters to do today is a lot different. So it is tough to do. Next slide, please. So the summary of our recommendations, there was 51 recommendations in the document. They're designed to prioritize the safety of residents and firefighters. The recommendations are all within Southwest Oxford's means to implement and include ways to for Southwest Oxford to act cost effectively wherever possible. Overall, the master fire plan outlines strategies and resources that will help council and the fire department provide an appropriate level of service to Southwest Oxford community now and in the coming years. Next slide, please. Next slide after that. So what I'm gonna talk about is like, what I've done is, we've picked out several of the recommendations, and we're gonna talk a little bit about them. So, and if once you get the document and start reading it, it's broken into 3 parts. Actually 4 parts. There's a context, which kind of outlines, say, legislation. It would outline the actual legislative values that you have to do as a fire department and a municipality. And then we come into a findings where we interviewed and data collection, found out what you're doing. Then we did a road to betterment going forward, your roadmap to success. So what we did was kind of roadmap out how to get successful, and then the recommendations. So they all flow together. The roadmap flows into the recommendations. So you can go through that document. If there's a recommendation there, you can go up, read the context, the findings, the roadmap, and then the recommendation will make some sort of sense after for you. Okay. So the first recommendation we're going to talk about today was recommendation 6.3. Southwest Oxford Fire and Emergency Services should implement a comprehensive retention plan, includes training opportunities, recognition programs, flexible schedules, and financial incentives. To talk about that, you know, you need to ensure that you have adequate staffing. So that's why you do recruitment, and that's why you try to retain people. It reduces cost by, if you can do, improve your retention, that reduces turnover, which reduces costs. Culture and morale, development, recognition programs help to build a community that's reliable. So it's like the old hockey adage, right? The best defense is a good offense. And if you do a really good job in retaining your people, you don't have to recruit people, right? So the retainment portion of it is something that we need to look at and try to ensure that you don't have to go out and recruit new people. So you have a lot of longstanding members here, and that's wonderful. And you know, those are the things that you need to look at going forward. Recommendation 6.4. Southwest Oxford should implement a process to ensure that voices of the local volunteer firefighters are heard and considered in decision making. So they're the hands-on people, right? You know, and sometimes we overlook those individuals when we're doing things, buying new equipment and new apparatus. And you know, they're the people at the end of the day that are going to drive the apparatus to a scene, or get the equipment off the truck, or use the equipment. So it's very important to try and get some of their information and what they think is going to help them going forward. Next slide, please. As we spoke about the 3 lines of defense, fire prevention and public education, the chief should implement a risk-based inspection schedule that ensures all high-risk occupancies and inspections are completed annually, and all moderate and low-risk occupancies can be reviewed on a rotating basis. So this aligns with actual community risk. It enhances both public and firefighter safety by focusing on things such as vulnerable occupancies or complex suppression challenges. This supports compliance with the Fire Protection Act focuses on prevention rather than reaction, right? Which suppression is a reaction. When a fire starts, we need to react and go to it. So a risk-based fire inspection schedule ensures the department deploys its resources to where it has to, and it gets the greatest impact with that, so. Next slide, please. Responses, recommendation 11.1. The fire chief should formalize a policy that restricts the storage of fire gear and personal vehicles to clean properly contained PPE. The policy should also require local firefighters to consult their insurance providers to verify potential changes in coverage and conditions. In order to ensure safety and compliance with NFPA standards, all gear should be stored and transported using the fire department vehicles. This policy is important because it protects the firefighters' health, reduces exposure to carcinogens, supports compliance with NFPA contamination control expectations, minimizes insurance and liability risk, preserves PPE lifespan, ensures consistent professional storage practices across the department. So the thing is, if you're allowing your firefighters to carry gear within their vehicles, you're not only exposing the firefighter to the carcinogens that are in that PPE, you're exposing their whole family to that. The vehicle's going to be contaminated with it. This isn't a new problem in the province, across the province. We've seen it a number of times with some of the departments that we've worked with, because distances are our biggest issue, and firefighters are all over, and you're trying to respond and you're trying to get them there. But the safety of them and their families, you gotta try and figure out a way. I know we've had lengthy discussions with the chief on it, trying to figure out what's the best way to do it, right? Because you just want to make sure that everybody's safe. And today, one of the biggest things that you hear in the fire service is the cancer, the carcinogens that's given off at fires because of the way all the synthetics that burn at fires today. Next slide, please. So this section, the fire department structure, okay, Southwest Oxford should explore ways to establish a shared fire chief or shared deputy fire chief arrangement with neighboring municipality in order to strengthen leadership capacity and ensure command continuity within Southwest Oxford Fire and Emergency Services. So as part of the ongoing development of the fire master plan, one of the recommendations that was under review was to explore the potential for a shared fire chief or deputy fire chief arrangement with a neighboring municipality. This recommendation appeared from an analysis of organizational capacity, leadership, sustainability, and the unique challenges faced by smaller and rural fire services. I want to clarify that this recommendation was already identified during the document's development. Although the final plan was still in production, the municipality has had discussions that was precipitated by such an arrangement of a vacancy of a fire chief locally and a local neighboring department, and we understand that, but it was already in the document. This recommendation is important because it enhances leadership capacity, it improves command continuity, it introduced essential redundancy within the service, so you'll have redundancy. A shared leadership model provides immediate access to broader ability while reducing administrative duplication. Enhance interoperability and standardized training, prevention, and operational procedures across municipal borders. It also creates a built-in redundancy, ensuring that if one officer is unavailable, the partner built-in or the municipality's chief officer can support uninterrupted command coverage, reducing operational risk during major or simultaneous incidents. Financial costing can be lowered with the burden of senior leadership positions while still deriving increased capacity, improved oversight, and a more robust succession plan. This collaborative approach enhances stability, strengthens regional relationships, and provides a more efficient and resilient leadership structure that either municipality could achieve independently. Recommendation 12.3. Southwest Oxford Fire and Emergency should explore the option of sharing administrative services with neighboring municipalities. And similar to what you're already doing with shared training officer and fire prevention officers within the area, okay? So this recommendation is important because shared admin services increase efficiency, reduce municipal costs, improve compliance, strengthen regional collaboration, and by building on the success of shared training and fire prevention programs, Southwest Oxford can expand administrative capacity, reduce workload pressures on volunteer leaders, and enhance overall professionalism and sustainability of the department. Next slide, please. Water supply. So to identify local firefighting constraints and capacities. Any needs related to non-fire rated systems should also be discussed, as some of the areas of Southwest Oxford are serviced by non-fire related drinking systems. So this recommendation is important because it ensures the department fully understands the local water supply constraints, particularly in areas serviced by non-fire related systems. By consulting with Oxford County, Southwest Oxford can improve operational planning, enhance risk assessments, strengthen interagency coordination, reduce liability, identify opportunities to improve your infrastructure. This collaboration ultimately increases public safety and supports a more resilient, coordinated fire protection system. And just to elaborate a little bit on that, I had an hour-and-a-half meeting with the county regarding the water, and I know they're doing some work this year, and they would really like you to be involved with them to see where you want to go in the future. So it was a great meeting with them, and they sound very cooperative and want to work with you. Recommendation 14.3. Southwest Oxford Fire and Emergency Services should consider acquiring larger capacity pumper tankers with the approximate capacity of 2,500 to 3,000 imperial gallons. Purchasing this tanker would enhance operational effectiveness of firefighter safety, long-term compliance with the Superior Tanker Shuttle Service accreditation requirements. So this recommendation to acquire a larger capacity pumper tanker is the first step in strengthening Southwest Oxford's water supply capacity. However, achieving reliable fire protection across the township, especially in the non-hydrant areas, require a broader enhancement of the entire fleet of the fire department. This approach supports the Superior Tanker Shuttle Service accreditation. It improves firefighter safety because a larger tanker, it has to make less trips. So that means it's safer for the firefighter going down the road. The tanker doesn't have to do as many trips. It's safer for the public on the road because the tanker's not doing as many trips. It ensures operational consistency throughout the department. If they're all the same, then it's consistent. The delivery of the water will be consistent from station to station. It reduces long-term financial risk and also enhances overall community fire protection. Strengthening the tanker fleet's an investment in the future resilience and effectiveness of Southwest Oxford Fire and Emergency Services. Next slide. That's my presentation, and if you have any questions or comments?
Okay, thanks, Rick. Questions, comments from council? Counselor Yedlin, you're first.
I have a number of them, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Rick, thanks for being here this morning. Appreciate it. I remember saying last summer that I was really looking forward to this report. I don't pretend to have read through the entire thing yet. I'm about halfway through it, but it's quite an in-depth report, so thank you for that. My first question is, given that this document is now in our hands and we've commissioned it, what is our level of, I hate to use the word liability, but what is our level of liability in terms of due diligence? The fact that this is now in print and in our hands, are we now more liable than we were yesterday by having this document? Even though it's going to take time, and indeed, if we do decide to implement all 51 recommendations, there may be some that we choose to set aside.
Through you, Mayor Milbury, I guess you gotta, when you look at the recommendations, the liability portion really lies in the legislative part. You know, fire prevention, public education, and legislation. Those are things that where you need to start. The rest of it, you have time to do that. And liability wise, again, mayor and council set the level of service for the community, right? It's what level of service you want to provide. And then what you need to do is ensure that that is loud and clear on the level of service. So your ENR bylaw, which you have today, if there's any changes, if there's anything that you want to address in there, you reinstate it into the ENR bylaw, then your liability portion is covered.
Okay, next question, under item 6.4, you talk about ensuring the voices of the local volunteer firefighters are heard and considered in decision-making processes. Given the paramilitary nature of the fire department and the chain of command, what processes do you see need to be in place for firefighters that may have difficulty with some of the processes or some of their senior leadership?
Through you, Mayor, today paramilitary, you're correct, that's how it works, but it's not as paramilitary as it once was. So you have district chiefs within the service. So the firefighters need to be able to have an avenue to be able to talk to their officers, their district chiefs, and then the district chiefs bring it up to the chief. And that communication, which I think can always be enhanced no matter where we are and what we do in life. The communication portion of it needs to be enhanced, right? So we got to make sure it's a two-way street on communication, and whatever flows up, when it flows back down, you give a reason, right? I mean, you're not just, no, it isn't at one time, paramilitary wise, the fire chief's final word was the final word. But today, I think we need to have that communication forward and backwards to ensure that their voice is being heard. They want to be heard, which that's, I think that's a fair assessment for them.
You mentioned in item 11.1 that firefighters should consult their insurance providers to verify potential changes in coverage condition. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Well, and through you, Mayor Mayberry, the issue with that is firefighters responding directly to scenes. I'm sure most don't tell their insurance companies they're doing that. And as you know, we just gone through a winter season that was a little bit above normal in the snow we had. So if they shut down a road and a firefighter drives his vehicle through a shut down road, his insurance may not cover him, right? Where a fire apparatus going down that road is covered because it's an emergency and you're going. But a personal vehicle doesn't get covered to go down that road. So I think, if you check with your own insurance, if you're running a business, you got to tell them how many kilometers you're driving every day and you're insured as per that. And I know, I mean, I was a volunteer firefighter for 20 some odd years and I never told my insurance company that I was doing those things, right? So it's something, it's that thing to try and weigh, right? You get the PPE and they bring it in their vehicles and they're getting to the scene, but then again, a firefighter with his personal vehicle gets to a house fire and he's standing there in their bunker gear, watching the house burn, waiting for a fire truck to come, is really not doing any, there's no value added to the event, right? So, and sometimes fire departments use that first person getting there, they radio in and they use that to say, stop the time, you know, hey, we got there. But that's not true, because you as a municipality to stop the time, you gotta be able to be on scene and be able to mitigate what's going on. So, that's kind of the reasoning, and they should be careful. I mean, you don't want them doing something outside of, and it's gonna cost you, right? So you just wanna make sure that everybody's protected in this, round.
Well, fun little story I had during my time in the service, years ago, I responded to a call and my car actually caught fire and burned out, so I was fighting the fire that was in the woods. And, my insurance company had a few questions.
And
Before we go any further, so we have a 9:30 appointment. So Rick, you're gonna have to hold it for a minute,
okay,
and we'll come back to that in a few minutes. We do have a drainage, report, for 9:30. So
With Mike's here, well.
Mike's not here yet.
is somebody going to show up, or is he showing up?
He might be out there.
So I just, want to be respectful of other people that went. Okay, so proceed with another question, don't forget, sir.
I just had one left, Mr. Mayor, thank you, and it's another one that comes from my days in the service. Years ago, the argument against larger tankers was the driver inexperience in hauling heavy loads. A lot of our volunteers do not drive heavy truck on a regular basis, and so I wonder if you can speak to that a little bit. You referenced how less trips down the road equals more safety for firefighters and the public. How do you compensate for the driver inexperience on these heavier loads?
through you, Mayor Milbury, thank you for the question. The tankers, and you're correct, they are heavier, but I mean, our pumpers are nearing the same weight today as that as well. So anyone operating a piece of apparatus needs to have the correct licensing, which is a DZ license, and you can train those individuals. Most cases, and I mean, from my experience when I was a volunteer firefighter, in the 28 years, probably 85% of the time that the same person drives the truck every time, right? They all seem to get there. I mean, they're all distance from the fire station and they get there in those distances. So you'll end up with the same one or two people that are always driving that piece of apparatus. And the safety aspect in the trucks, the way they're built today, they're all automatic transmissions. So driving them is very similar. So I really don't see any issues. I mean, your driver, and we do talk in the document about a driver education program, and you need to ensure that drivers are educated on each vehicle that they're going to drive and make sure that they can drive those vehicles safely.
Okay, other questions? Any questions? Go ahead, Councilman Miller.
More comment, I thank Rick for his document and whatnot, it seems a little overwhelming at first, when you first kind of breeze through it, of the 51 recommendations. But I think a good handful or a third of them already kind of are in progress per se, or something that the township's already recognized as something to move forward with. So I think that, that shows that, the direction is already headed in the right way. I think some of these things will be easier to kind of knock off the list, at a time, and others will come back to us for more conversation later. I think it's just a good starting point, and I think it's a step in the right direction.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councilor Wood.
Yeah, just concerning the fact that volunteer firefighters driving their vehicles. And it's been recommended that they not drive their vehicles, that they go to the fire station. Would that result in the fire truck not leaving as quick as what it could? And I believe we are supposed to have so many firefighters on the scene. It's recommended within so many minutes, so people might question why the fire truck is sitting there, whereas 3 miles down the road, there's a house burning, and it's just sitting there waiting, and firefighters are driving by the burning house to get to the fire department. So I mean, we can't control what the insurance companies tell us, and I get that. But I just think this doesn't look that good when the fire truck is just sitting there waiting to be, like these new fire trucks, I think 5, 7, 8 people they can fit, some. Whatever, if you're waiting for that truck to be built, you're wasting time in the eyes of some people. Like, if the truck's not moving, why is it not moving? Well, we're waiting for firefighters to show up. And, depends where the fire is and where the firefighters are at the time, it might be more convenient for them to just drive to the scene. So I don't know, because that's down the road could be a problem or a headache or.
Through you, Mayor Milbury, thank you for the question, and yes, I mean, it's a perceived issue, right? I mean, I understand we're delaying the movement of the fire apparatus to get it to the scene. But again, we can't mitigate the fire unless the fire apparatus gets there, and you have to have personnel on the vehicle. As a municipality, as an employer of the firefighters, you want to make sure you get the firefighters there as safely as possible. You spend an enormous amount of money on your fleet currently. Your fleet is designed to put firefighters in to safely get them to a fire scene. Their personal vehicles aren't designed for that, right? So, I mean, as a mayor and council, you can say, yeah, we understand we're delaying getting the firefighters there, the fire apparatus there, because we're waiting for firefighters, but you gotta have a minimum of 4 to be able to start to do anything. And as you alluded to, there is for a single family dwelling, they say, 14 to 17 people to effectively fight that fire. You're not gonna have 17 people show up at the onset of a fire. But as the fire department responds and gets there, as the number of people grow, you get there with 4, and then the next 4 come, that's 8, and then all of a sudden you got 13 people, and you add jobs that you need to do to mitigate the circumstance that you're working at. So as the firefighters come on scene, that grows as you go. Yes, you're delaying response, and this would probably go back onto the fire chief to look at setting a response guideline. We'll have the fire apparatus leave with 4 individuals on it. And in most cases, to get 4, you're probably not delaying that first piece of apparatus to get out of your fire station in a reasonable amount of time.
Any other questions or comments? So I got a couple, Rick, if you look at the overall, fire emergency services in, Southwest Oxford, would you say that we're probably typical of rural in operation and, methodologies, of rural Ontario.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, you're very typical, right? I mean, you've done. What you do today is very typical, and the fire service as the municipality, you're weaving through a whole new world of, you know, legislation regarding the training of firefighters and where they gotta be trained to, and understandably, you're weaving through that path, but your department, where you stand right now, you've done an admirable job. So you're very typical or even above the norm in where you stand today.
Okay. I just, Councillor Pickard, I'm sorry, I didn't ask, did you have any questions, Councillor Pickard?
No, I kind of wonder about implementation. It's good to hear that maybe a third of this is underway, but it looks like a huge amount of work put on our fire chief. So my concern was more about implementation and time available.
So, Rick, next question I had was, if you look at the location of our three halls, all of them in built up areas or at the very edge of built up areas, Mount Brownville, Peachtree, they're none sort of stuck out in the middle of nowhere. From your perspective, is that the appropriate location? I read in the report the questions about, you know, location of halls or.
Thank you for the question, Mayor. Currently, I mean, if you're gonna locate a fire station, you need to locate it where the firefighters are, right? So you've done that, right? You're in build up locations. What we wrote in the report is, it looks like you're gonna start growing. And when you start to grow your municipality, then you're gonna have to look to determine where the next best place to put that fire station is. But right now, as we see where you're located, you have the personnel and the fire station both in the same place, which is you gotta get the firefighters to the fire hall and get the fire apparatus moving. So right now you've done, you're in good position.
Certainly our growth area, interesting enough, will be up in a few minutes, is not open, right? Just before I ask the next question, are we gonna find out if Mike the boss is actually gonna show up today? He's on his way, okay. Next one, around that then, you talk about in the report about a retention strategy. And I couldn't agree more. I think retention is absolutely essential. We want to and do invest in people coming on. We want them to be safe. We want everybody to get home at the end of whatever the incident is. I'm just wondering how you see that retention strategy actually playing out in rural areas where it is difficult to get enough people. Be able to give up their day jobs and, you know, all of the other requirements to just actually show up. And I'm just wondering how you see that happening.
Thank you for the question, Mayor. Retention is a very tough thing today, especially in the fire service. It was easy to recruit people back 40 years ago when I joined. I was 2 when I joined. And back then, you said fire department, and that meant fires, right? I mean, we seen fires 40 years ago, and that's what people joined for, was put the wet stuff on the red stuff, right? That was the enticement of being a firefighter. Today, that doesn't happen. As you know today, and I'm sure the chief has reported to you, you know, half of the calls are medical calls. You're doing medical and you're doing motor vehicle accidents. And, you know, 8 to 10% of the actual business of the fire department today is fires, right? So recruiting them under the word fire is getting a little tougher to recruit. But the retention, as you say, I think, I don't think over the years we put enough emphasis on retention. And as you said, we invest, or you invest a lot of money in your firefighter employees. $4,000 in bunker gear, and then the time to train them to NFPA standards. Is it the time when they get their 5 years in or 10 years on the department to come to council, be recognized by council, have, an appreciation night? So you need to, and I fully understand it all costs money. But at the end of the day, those little things of acknowledging who they are and what they do will go a long ways in retaining.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to hold you right there. Don't go anywhere. I've got more questions. So, Mike, you're here. Let's get right on to the Deer Creek drain consideration. I'll let you take your jacket off if you want, but. Rick, if you don't mind sitting back, make sure come up back there and give us a one report. If you want to add to it.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mick, we're late.
All right, thanks. The report for the Deer Creek drain, is a report that was prepared under sections 4 and 78 of the Drainage Act. There is the existing, drain A, was requested to be replaced. It is an older drain, approximately 1960. So it is, in terms of depth and condition and size, needing to be replaced. It's existing tile. It outlets into an open channel, where it goes into a wetland. There was also a petition for a new branch, what we're referring to as drain F, to the east. They have the same outlet location, so they both outlet into the open portion of drain A in the same location. But it heads upstream and services two properties in the eastern part of the same watershed. During the process, it was requested that we investigate converting the upper piece of the open channel that goes through the field outside the wetland to be converted into a tile drain with an overflow swale for larger rain events. So that was investigated and priced, and it was decided to move forward with that. Approvals from the environmental agencies were required to do that. So we are looking at reconstructing the existing tile. The new drain will vary in size from 14-inch to 27-inch, and with some portion of the channel being replaced with 27-inch tile and an overflow channel. There are a number of low areas, trapped low areas in this watershed. A lot of the water doesn't find its way out down to the ditch that easily, and also it does create deep depths in other places where you're not in the low ground, and the landowners have added some fill in those particular locations so that the new drain doesn't have to be too much deeper than the old drain. It'll be mostly bigger. But the watershed as a whole has been accommodated to sufficient depth based on the ground elevations that are there. There will be catch basins put in particular low areas. There is a pond about halfway up on drain A where the old drain goes in and out of the pond. And we will be putting a splitter to allow some of the low flow part of our flows go into the pond to maintain the pond. The landowner requested that we maintain the pond, but also allow better drainage and have a pipe go past the pond. We would use seal pipe as we get close to the pond, but our elevations are such that we're not changing the water level too much with it. We would be lowering it slightly, but maintaining it by veering off to the side and keeping the tile as shallow as we can, and using seal pipe as we go past them. And stop opening up to questions at that point.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Any questions from council? Okay. Okay, this is for consideration, so, anyone contributing towards the drain that wants to ask any questions in the audience, please feel free to, state your name and, any questions you have on the, overall, report, so, sorry. Go ahead, Tom, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure where this pond you refer to, one particular area, where is that located?
It is located in, I would say, the center of lot 24, right at the half concession line in Kerwin Lane Farms.
Which permanent?
Yeah. Yeah, it's, the existing tile goes into the upstream end of the pond currently, dumps out into the pond, and there's a catch basin at the far end of the pond. And we would just stay to the north side of that and still have water go into it, but it would be a smaller pipe, and once the flow is in the pipe, our new pipe get big enough, they would go past the pond in a separate pipe and go into the side of the pond.
Years ago, there used to be a pond there and a dam in the same area you're talking.
Yeah, that's that spot.
Before you were born.
Any other questions, regarding the drain? The proposed, plan here? Go ahead.
Again, here, Mr. Mayor, just, find out how to assess to my property, which basically all drains into the other drains. What I want to clarify.
Which properties?
Our Tom Parker.
Tom Parker. There is a little bit of the east piece of the bush. Just the very easterly part of the bush. Would slope in towards this drain, and then there's a tiny little piece. South of the bush up against the east property line that would slope towards our drain, just a little tiny corner. So there's a small amount, most of that has been.
$2,000 worth of it.
Unfortunately, with the length of this drain, and we do have some areas of unstable soil. So we are recommending a contingency allowance be put in to install portions of this drain on a crushed stone bedding. And that itself is a bit more costly than if we were in clay ground and we could use a wheel machine the entire length.
So
So
if it drains into the bush, isn't that okay? We're saving the water from the environment, the ocean.
yes, it goes into the bush, but it's tributary to this drain, and if the landowners have water seep out of the bush, or if they put a Hickenbottom at the north edge of the bush, then there still will be water that will end up getting to this drain. It's not, bush is assessed at a lower rate. We realize that field areas are not tiled. They don't have subsurface drainage, you're not bringing it to it, and they hold water more than what a field would. So bush areas are assessed at a lower rate, but they do have water that's contributing to the drain.
Any other questions on the actual design of the drain? Knowing that in probably a month's time, we'll have a discussion or a meeting to discuss the actual cost of the drain as far as individuals can appeal their assessment, so. Anything further? Or if anybody wants their name added or withdrawn from the petition?
Section 78, and section 78.
There is a part as section 4.
Okay.
So I didn't describe it. Drain F is a new drain to the east, and so it is a new drain, and it does have a petition.
So
Okay, anyone want to add, take your name off the petition? Seeing none, or Daniel, anything you wanted to comment on this drain?
No, it's been kind of ongoing maintenance there, so it's due for, at this point. No concerns, that's all.
Okay, having dealt with that, anything further from council? Councilor Webb.
Just a quick question through the mayor to Mike. You talk about some of these joints may need to be wrapped. Is that, and that I see is an added bill on top of the assessments? Who makes the decision what joints need to be wrapped and which ones don't? Like, why do you wrap some and not all of them? Or,
Yeah, maybe there's misunderstanding there. All joints of the concrete tile are wrapped. We do that whether it's clay or not. That was in the early 1990s. We switched to it. There's at times these tiles could have pressure in them or a vacuum. And you could get sort of being sucked into the tile or blowing out of the tile just by pressure, forgetting the fact that you have stable or unstable soil. So we do that with every single joint is wrapped.
okay,
What happens though is if you get areas where the bottom is unstable, if it's in wet sand and the pipes will sink or shift because of the unstableness of the soil underneath and the pipe's concrete, so it's a bit heavier. Then what we do is we stop using the wheel machine. We bring an excavator in and we dig the trench with an excavator. We lay geotextile in the bottom of the trench. We put crushed stone in the bottom of the trench, thick enough that it gets stable and firm to hold pipe. And we close that crushed stone up into like an enclosed pillow almost. And that, then you rest the tile on top of that because you now have a firm base and then wrap the joints separately. That's the difference in the mechanism. And that would be our call between the contractor, us and Daniel. We would monitor the base. If there's any suspicion that the base is not clay or becoming unstable, then we make that determination in the field. We provide an estimate of a certain length of that. It's not the whole drain, but we think it's long enough that we're trying to be as accurate as what we can. And then we say, this is the amount of length that we think might need it. At the end of the day, if it's less, then we would only pay for the area that's needed because it's a contingency. If it happens to be more, we would have to pay for the longer length. Yeah.
Any other questions on this? So, next part will be then to, accept the, report. And, first and second reading of the bylaw, and then, we would have the, court of revision in, approximately a month's time. So, okay, no other questions from anyone in the public on the drain? Seeing none, no one, Councilor Pickard, any questions from you?
No questions.
Okay, anything further, Mike?
Nope.
No, okay. Good motion then, regarding the recommendation in this report.
So move.
Moved by Pickard, seconded by Wade, result, Council Thompson, accepting insurance report as appendix A for report DD 03/2026, prepared by Street Associates and dated January 20th, 2026, regarding the Deer Creek drain in accordance with section 78 and 4 of the Drainage Director also 1990, chapter 17, D17, and further the council approves of bylaw in the form prescribed by the regulations with the engineering report attached to it for first reading by the council, at which point the report should be considered to be adopted and the bylaw should be known as the Deer Creek Drain Provisional Bylaw. Any further discussion? If none, all those in favor?
Yes.
Carried. Thanks very much, Mike, and we'll see you again in a month time. Okay. Don't get excited, Rick, you're gonna have to wait till the next report. Megan House from Arthur County here on the land needs forecast and or land needs and growth forecast. So Megan, please. Morning, Megan, we all have the report and stuff in front of us, so if you want to proceed.
Okay, good morning, Mayor and members of council. I guess we can do the first slide, please. Okay, I was asked to come here today to provide a summary of the planning report that went to county council in January regarding the study to update the county growth forecasts and land needs assessment. So I'm also going to recap the study findings for Southwest Oxford in terms of both the growth forecast and the land needs, or the land needed to accommodate that growth. And then discuss some considerations and the process for implementation for the findings of the study. So next slide. County Council received a staff report and presentation from Watson Associates economists on January 28th, and a detailed report by the consultant was also provided to council, and I noticed that was linked in your agenda. The staff report recommended that the updated growth forecasts for the county be adopted as the official growth forecast for the county. And then the land needs assessment component was also included and provided an assessment of the land needed to accommodate the forecasted growth. And it broke it down into 20 years, 25 years and 30-year planning periods. So generally the maximum or the 30-year planning period is used by municipalities for planning for growth, as it provides the longest lead time for comprehensively planning for services and infrastructure, public service facilities. However, staff didn't recommend a specific planning period in this report, as we feel that the provincial planning statement provides flexibility to determine the planning period for each area, for each municipality, based on various factors like infrastructure and service needs and other constraints, and just the appropriate phasing of development. So anyway, at that meeting, after much discussion, the county council did defer adopting the growth forecasts and asked for more information on the impact of growth on the county and area municipal finances and service delivery. So we have yet to provide that report, and we'll see how comprehensive information we can provide on the impacts of growth. Next slide, please. So to recap the presentation that was provided to this council in September 2025, the growth forecast showed that the population of the township is anticipated to grow at a rate of 0.9%, which would be an increase of approximately 3,600 persons over the next 40 years. So the total population of the township would be approximately 11,600 persons by 2061. Next slide. And then in terms of employment growth, the number of jobs is anticipated to grow at a rate of 0.6% for an increase of approximately 900 jobs over the next 40 years. And that would mean a total of 4,300 jobs by 2061. Next slide, please. So this is the schematic explains the community structure that was used for determining land needs in the study. So we take the forecasted growth and then we have to convert that into the land needed to accommodate that growth. So in the study, each area municipality is first divided into their service villages and then their unserviced areas or unserviced settlement areas and remaining rural areas. Then the service villages are further divided into employment areas. So when we talk about employment, it's the industrial type uses. Other employment is included in the community areas. So the community areas include residential, commercial, and institutional uses. And then the community areas were further divided into greenfield area and then the built up area. And the built up area was just defined by what was generally built around 2009. So the mapping is included in that larger 300-page report. If you want to see what your built up area for Mount Elgin is. Next slide. So the forecasted housing growth has primarily been allocated to the service village of Mount Elgin. So over the next 30 years, 85% of the new housing units would be anticipated to be built in Mount Elgin. So that's approximately 27 units annually. The remaining 15% would be built in unserviced settlement areas or remaining rural areas. So that's approximately 5 units per year. And a housing unit, I think this question came up when we came in September. A housing unit could be a second dwelling on a farm or an ARU, like a unit is a unit. So that's kind of what's anticipated for the rural areas. Next slide, please. And then in terms of the employment growth, it's also been primarily allocated to the fully serviced village of Mount Elgin. Either within the employment areas or as in the community areas as commercial and institutional uses, which we call population related employment. And then the remaining 7% of the employment has been allocated to the unserviced settlement areas and rural. Next slide, please. So after we considered the existing supply of vacant land in Mount Elgin, So that's either approved for development or designated for residential uses. The resulting land need needed to accommodate the forecasted growth in the community area is 11 gross developable hectares in the 20-year period, 21 gross developable hectares in the 25-year period, and 30 hectares in the 30-year period. So, and gross developable hectares is the land needed minus constraints, just so you're clear on that, that doesn't include natural features and hazards, kind of thing, that's sort of in addition to, the gross developable hectares. Next slide, please. And then, in terms of the employment growth, yeah, so it's mostly contained within the categories that are the community area and the employment areas within the service villages. And then there's a small proportion assigned to the dry industrial uses in unserviced settlement areas, and an even smaller amount assigned to the remaining rural area in the form of new agriculturally based and resource extraction jobs, those types of jobs. Next slide. So again, we considered the existing supply of vacant industrial land in Mount Elgin. And so the resulting land need for industrial type uses is 1 hectare in the 20-year period, 3 hectares in the 25-year period, and 6 hectares in the 30-year period. So you have a fairly good supply of vacant industrial land currently, so that reduced the need there. Next slide, please. And then the consultant has also provided anticipated demand for rural industrial land. So it's primarily meant to accommodate growth in unserviced settlements. But in the case of Southwest Oxford, it may comprise some lands in Mount Elgin, just due to the nature of your wastewater system and the type of effluent it can handle. We are anticipating that maybe some dry industrial uses could go into it as well. There's servicing constraint. So next slide, please. So in summary, the total land needed to accommodate the forecasted growth in Mount Elgin is 12 gross developable hectares in the 20-year period, 24 gross developable hectares in the 25-year period, and 36 gross developable hectares in the 30-year period. Again, primarily residential or community area land, commercial and institutional uses as well. Okay, and next slide. So in terms of implementation, there's some considerations for you to think about. The study was undertaken to make efficient use of existing and planned water and wastewater servicing capacity. We'll try to use what will be available after your upgrades that are planned. And to support complete communities. So complete communities are where you have jobs and residents in the same area. And so secondary planning typically includes a phasing strategy, so you can identify which lands would be serviced and developed first, and identify any lands that can't currently be developed based on existing or planned servicing capacity. So that would be something that would be considered as part of the secondary plan. Although in your case, it's my recollection is once you've done the next phase of upgrades, I think that's it, and that is your phase, and you'd be done at that point. So then further, the cost for new services can be assessed through fiscal impact analysis for the secondary plan area. So that was done most recently for the Ingersoll secondary plan. We undertook a fiscal impact assessment and to assess, the costs of the public service facilities and infrastructure to the community. As mentioned, we anticipate a portion of new employment growth could be dry industrial uses, even within the service villages. So I think that would be a consideration when we look at the servicing capacity and how best to how much growth can be accommodated within Mount Elgin. So, and then yes, under the provincial planning statement, the settlement area boundary expansion process is required to consider the capacity of infrastructure and public service facilities and avoid and mitigate or avoid or minimize and mitigate the impacts to agriculture. So that's something that would be looked at through the secondary plan process. And I just put down that another way that municipalities can prepare for growth is to update their own municipal master plans. So consider development of a parks master plan or stormwater management master plan, those types of things. Prepare for growth. Next slide. So the provincial planning statement requires municipalities to have a 3-year supply of land zoned and serviced for development and a 15-year supply of land designated available for residential development. So that's more that it's just identified in the official plan, but not actually zoned and serviced. So the supply of designated available land in Southwest Oxford is approximately 11 years currently. So Southwest Oxford has less than a 15-year supply of lands designated and available for residential development. So that does trigger the need for a settlement boundary, settlement area boundary expansion review. And so the recommended next step is the initiation of that review and a secondary plan to plan for those expanded areas. And typically that would, as mentioned, would include a servicing strategy and other components like a fiscal impact assessment. And yeah, the scope of the study is on your next item on the agenda today, so we'll have that conversation. Also, as the Watson study recommended, we're undertaking further evaluation of locations for the rural dry industrial. So the county plans to undertake this work within the short term, and we'll need to coordinate that with the secondary plan work. So thank you for this opportunity to revisit these growth forecasts and refresh everyone, and provide some additional information with implementation. I would be pleased to answer any questions.
Good, thanks very much, Megan. John Sprickard, I'll start with you. Do you have any questions on this report?
Yes, I just wondered, Megan, how many ARUs are included in your study per year?
Through the mayor to the councillor, I don't think specifically we know the number of ARUs, but yeah, I mean, in terms of the rural area, those 5 units per year, I think is pretty much ARUs only. There's not too many surplus farm dwelling severances and things that are happening anymore. So I think those would be ARUs in terms of in the rural, but like the serviced area, I don't know if I can really estimate that. Like I know what I could look up what we've been averaging, but I don't think we really broke it down like that.
Okay, and this settlement area boundary review would suggest that does that suggest other settlements like other villages in the community would be getting services? Is that taken into consideration, the villages that don't have services?
I think it's part of that.
So you wanted to, if other villages would get service, as, you know, or considered for service, I think, as you do the boundary review, the village boundary review.
Yeah, we can't do a boundary adjustment without the services being available. So
Right,
is there any discussion about services being made available to other villages in Southwest Oxford?
Yeah, through the mayor, I don't think so. I mean, most of the growth has been assigned to Mount Elgin as your service settlement area. I think it was 85%. So no, that we're not anticipating servicing other areas or focusing on other areas.
Okay.
Okay, anything further, Councillor Hurd?
No, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Councillor Gillis?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, to further that last question, so would the county be approachable to expand the service villages or the unserviced villages even without new servicing capacity? Like, say, extend them a little bit further, whether it be, you know, privately owned well and septic, compared to full services over the service village, would they be willing to allow that to happen?
Through the mayor, I don't think that wasn't contemplated as part of this, exercise. I mean, the second phase of this work is to decide where growth goes. However, I think there's a definitely preference for it to go on fully service, areas. I think the only thing that may result in, expansions to the unserviced settlement areas, maybe that rural dry industrial piece, because we aren't allowed to have non-agricultural uses in the agriculture area, like they need to be within a settlement area, so, I think that's an opportunity for growth to some of those unserviced settlement areas, is for the dry industrial.
For the second question, so in looking at the report, the summary of township land needed. So basically the earlier reports say we're growth of 0.9% year over year, so 1% year over year. So in summary, it's saying 20 years we're needing 12 hectares. And then it doubles in 25 years to 24. But we're only looking at a 1% growth year over year. So why did that go from under 0.6 hectares a year to double that for a 5-year span and then continue on a 30-year, when the growth is pretty much a stagnant line of 1%?
You know, through the merit, it's because you go through your existing supply of vacant land in the earlier period, so, I think it's about 11 or 12 years that you have remaining, so that would make up a portion of that 20-year period, but then as you get to the 25 and 30, you have less of that available.
Julie, you want to do something?
I was just gonna note, thank you to you, if council recalls last year, when the county was doing their water wastewater master plan. SWAC's council provided direction to the county that we were not going to extend services in any other settlement areas with the exception. And Mount Elgin was gonna remain our only fully serviced settlement area, so my understanding is that also feeds into this growth forecast and why this indicates the majority of the growth was anticipated to be within Mount Elgin. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think provincial planning statement puts a emphasis on, assigning growth to your fullest, like, there's a preference for fully serviced settlement areas. And yeah, I think that would, the county's servicing strategy or feeds into that as well.
Any other questions? Oh, Councilor Eaton, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In one of your final slides, or maybe the last one, you talk about the PPS requires a 3-year zone and service availability and 15 years of designated and available. Do we ever get to a point where we can just say we've had enough growth? Can we at some point say, Mount Elgin's big enough, we're done? Or what? Does a province mandate that we just have to accept whatever comes our way?
Yeah, through the mayor, I mean, it's a tricky question to answer, I guess, but yeah, I mean, the province does require us to plan for growth, and to use the Ministry of Finance projection numbers now, which have tended to be a bit high in recent years. So that does push the forecasts and the land needs up a bit. So yeah, they do require us to do that, but if we end up not having servicing capacity, or we can't provide growth or accommodate growth where there's no servicing capacity. So there is a finite amount in certain communities, and that may be the case in Mount Elgin. That's to be determined.
Like would the expectation be that at some point we would have to expropriate if necessary? I guess my question is derived from, I've been beating the drum for a long time about maintaining as much as possible the workable land here in Southwest Oxford. It's some of the best farmland in the country. And there are other parts of Ontario where the land is either less desirable or is already turned into very large communities, cities, where there could be some intensification going on rather than expanding onto our available farmland. At some point, are we going to finally recognize in this province, and that may be beyond your scope, but are we going to recognize that we need to be able to grow food somewhere? And so once, and I recognize that there's some of the land in and around Mount Elgin that's not ideal yet either, and so I'm prepared to go down that road to develop some of that ground. But once you get off of the mound of Mount Elgin, the rest of the ground around that village is pretty good ground. And the rest of the ground around all of our villages is pretty good ground. And so at what point do we finally stop building on the stuff that we can actually grow food out of? And start building on areas where it's not nearly as well suited. Some of your harder clay soils and some of your more northern areas.
Yeah, through the, I mean, I think that is a good question. We don't have really a provincial growth strategy that looks at things from that perspective. So that's, I mean, all I can say is through the settlement boundary review process and secondary plan process is we do the agricultural impact assessments and try to find the least impactful direction for growth and to try to mitigate the impacts of whatever livestock facilities that are nearby or whatever that aren't necessarily being used actually for the growth, but are nearby and being impacted.
Anything further? Councilor Gillis.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So there was a comment made about the projections being possibly a little high. So what is the faith in those numbers? Plus or minus 10%, or is it just more based on the reality of the last few years we've had substantial growth and that has pushed those averages high? I'm just wondering is the fact that there's a lot of outside factors that could start to change that number, whether it be interest rates or housing costs or whatever. How much could that change or derail this plan in a hurry?
Well, through the mayor, I guess I don't really comment on what our consultant has said, and the mayor may have to help me with my memory a little bit, but I believe he said that it was within a sort of a 5 to 10% range of error, and you know, but that's been his average, and that they did try to be as conservative as they could within the parameters of using the Ministry of Finance projections. That is what we were. We've been told in the policy document that we need to base our projections on now. I believe the consultant says that they're ambitious, but still reasonable numbers that seem like they're the word he used, possible to obtain. So that's that piece. As far as I lost my train of thought, I had something else I wanted to add to that.
So I think council's perspective, the fact that Ministry of Finance actually sets a number that they think is going to be the projected growth. And that you're required in your official plan, correct me if I'm wrong, to actually accept those numbers within a reasonable range. You can't say, no, we're gonna reject them completely. When Watson did their report, they were within a couple of percent of the same number. So they said, this is what we think, and you look at the Ministry of Finance, and they're pretty close. So Ministry of Finance numbers might be a little bit higher than what kind of the median of Watson. So that's projected what the growth is gonna be. And that's fine, I accept that. But that's for the county, it's not necessarily for Southwest Oxford. So the question that Councilor Evans just asked about, so where do we actually want this growth? Needs to be asked. And I guess that's kind of where I want to have this conversation around growth and what within our jurisdiction, what is the wish of council as far as going forward? So I want to give you an example. If we increase the population of Mount Elgin, of Southwest Oxford, by 3,500 people, which is a projection in the next 40 years, that would create about 1,000 new homes in Mount Elgin. The water, and if we take 85% and say that's going to be Mount Elgin, that's 1,000 new homes. And the water and wastewater system in Mount Elgin is only good for 1,000 homes. So we're gonna be 500 homes above what the capacity of the system is. So your choices are, you drill a new well, that's relatively simple. Or you have to, so the water part, I'm not so worried about. The wastewater part is, we know that we're gonna maximize the wastewater system there. And that the province will not allow it to be expanded. So the question then becomes, do you build a new pollution control plant in North Oven, or do you ship the pipeline into Ingersoll, Tillsonburg? And the projection from the county was send it to Ingersoll, so that's fine. But the cost projection was about $10 million. My question would be then, would we be further ahead, and this is, kind of forget all the rules from that, would we be further ahead to say, we'll let Mount Elgin grow to the 1,000 houses total. The second 500 houses that are projected in this actually should go somewhere else. And that may be Tillsonburg, that may be Beachville, that may be Shrewsbury, I don't know. I'm just saying, at what point do you say the village is big enough, or the community is big enough? And that's the flip side of that becomes, what's the size required to make it a livable community where people get the services they think they need or want within the area? So I'll make this number of 3,000 people in Mount Elgin, is that big enough to support the kind of infrastructure, stores and grocery store or whatever? Or is it still too small and everybody still goes to a larger urban center for all of their needs? And so I think it's well, I appreciate, and I'm not in any way being negative to what the county is, the county planning staff now is doing. They're simply saying, these are the numbers, this is how it should kind of, or how it might kind of play out in a normal course of doing business. Councillor Yitman raises a question about, do we actually want a normal course of business? Do we want some other system where we simply say, no, we prefer to keep agricultural and agriculture? And I say that with a bit of hesitation because, while I want to preserve agricultural land, I also realize that we have to be sustainable economically to be able to plow the roads and fire services and all that sort of stuff. So there's kind of a balance all the time. And I tend to lean a little bit away from worrying about the financial part, because I've been told enough times in the last 25, 30 years at council that residential never pays for residential unless the taxes are so high that it does. We depend on industrial and commercial to actually kind of lower the taxes for residential. So I think there's a number of factors coming in, and that's why I wanted to have Megan here, and especially before Laurel says, and this is our view of the secondary plan from Mount Elgin, because I think if everybody says, no, let's let it grow and we'll build a pipe into Ingersoll, we don't want to grow any of the other villages, that's fine with me if that's the choice of council. I'm just saying we should be clear on what are the choices that we're making. The fact that we said, no, we think we'll concentrate on Mount Elgin, from my perspective as council, was over the reasonable time frame you could see. I don't know, saying, well, no, we decided, no, Mount Elgin's only growing to this size, and then after that, you have to service another bill, which would be fine. But I think we need to sort of understand what are the implications of this. And quite frankly, we're not going to get Megan an answer tonight or today, I'm pretty sure, because I'd like council to think a little bit more about it. But from a county perspective, like a larger perspective, the question being asked, and Megan said a county council preferred adoption. The question being asked was the same question, but at a much higher level. How much water is there in the ground in Oxford County? The projection was 223,000 or something for 24 or 2060. Is there enough water in the ground to service it? We can always build large pollution plants, but that population could be serviced 175,000, but if we go to 200,000, we have to build a pipeline in from Lake Ontario, or sorry, Lake Erie or whatever, right? So all those things should be considered before we say we're going in that direction. We should know all the costs of getting there, and I think that's quite frankly, we can't we can't deal with the housing problem we've got in Oxford County now. If you had another 75,000 or 80,000 people, you think the problem gets smaller or bigger? And I think that's kind of, all those things need to be considered. We don't have enough school, we don't have enough, healthcare, that sort of stuff. All the things should be considered before we say, yeah, we're gonna go to 223,000, whatever the number was. So I think it's more than simply saying, this is a projected growth, get on the train and go for a ride, which is the way I feel we're going. I think we try to jump on the train. I want to make sure that the destinations where Southwest Oxford, and I say this to this council, where Southwest Oxford actually wants to be. And if you don't want to be there, the time is now to say, I don't think we're getting on that train, we're going to get on another train. Or we're gonna kind of encourage another direction. Because while we have to, the county has to accept the number of total people, the projection by the province and Ministry of Finance, Southwest Oxford actually doesn't have to. They can say, no, we'll take 1,000 people and the other 2,500 people can go to Woodstock, Gothenburg, Ingersoll or Zora. I don't care. Anyways, that's kind of where I want this conversation to go. And I think it's a much broader conversation than I'm thinking we're gonna have right now. But because I think we need to think through it. And it probably should be on the agenda in the future. Because what does this group of people, this council is responsible for this group of stuff I talked about now, what do they see projecting? And what kind of view or plan or vision are they gonna provide to the next council that will be here in 8 months back? Anyway, enough of the sermon. Any further comments? Any further questions? I guess maybe we should start with for Megan from a larger, like, this is what the statistics or what the numbers say. What does that mean for us? So, Council, Gil, please.
So through you to Megan, then as the county's perspective, like, is this gonna promote the county pushing intensification everywhere? Like, not just the urbans, but also in the rurals to up their, instead of like low level to medium density or making places more aware of other housing types that they haven't thought of before, to kind of preserve some land or at least move in that direction compared to the same old single detached they've done before.
Yeah, through the mayor. So we are still, well, I mean, this study had a component of like assigned growth through intensification. I believe it was 9% from Mount Elgin because you don't have a lot of vacant sites or sites that could be intensified. So that was already built into the study and kind of reduces the number off the top. And then we're working on other policy initiatives towards intensification as well, like increasing the minimum required density for new development. Something that I was working on kind of before this study started, but they have, the consultant has reinforced that we should do that. So we will proceed with that work. And so that's something we're working on. I think also updating zoning bylaws and allowing more unit types within various zones is something that we're looking at. So yeah, that work is in progress. And I mean, the bigger urbans will be a bit more of a focus for that, but for various reasons, but we will be doing some in Melbourne. In other villages as well. And sorry, actually, I remembered what I was gonna say about your question about the margin of error or whatever. I was just gonna point out that we do redo these studies every 5 years or so. Especially if we see that this one is particularly off or whatever, probably be done in the nearer term, more in the nearer term than usual. So that's just something to point out. It's a continual monitoring process, and we don't just walk into these forecasts and land needs for a longer term.
So the intensification for Mount Elgin is 9%, for the rest of the county, serviced areas, and I'm not sure about all of the villages, but for the 3 urban, it's 25%. So you get 25% more units within the area you've already got. In Mount Elgin, it's 9, so if you think about Mount Elgin, at currently 275 or 300 homes, they gotta get another 25, 30 homes into the area they've already got, so they're splitting lots or ARUs in the backyard or whatever. Right? So that's kind of the intensification. I think the idea of a 25% intensification for some of the larger urbans is great. I think. In fact, I would suggest it probably should be higher, but we'll see. Anyways, further questions for Megan on the the growth report and any questions you have regarding what we need to know before we have further consideration and discussion, or maybe you're satisfied with the way it is, so. We think this is going to require more discussion, and actually Laurel will be helping with that, and kind of helping understand what secondary plan will mean in Mount Elgin. And then Chad and Joel may give us even more information to sort of say where do we go. Any further questions, Keith? Okay, well, thanks very much, Megan. Any final thoughts from you?
No, I think I may stick around for the conversation in
Sure.
the secondary plan, so if something else occurs to you, I'll probably be here.
Okay, thanks very much. It's 10:35. We want to take a 5-minute break and then we'll start with Laurel. All right, one of us needs to take a 5-minute break. The rest You ready? I don't want to interfere, you go ahead. It's a great pleasure, today, to recognize, firefighter of, Vermont Service. Ken, thanks first of all for coming today, for really appreciate that. Shane wants to make comments and then I'll make it as well, so.
Perfect, thank you, and through you, Mayor and Council. March first, is the date, it's a sad date for the fire service. Ken Van Asseldonk, a long serving member of 35 years, has tendered his retirement. And, you know, it's kind of fitting in this forum to discuss it when we're talking about retention, recruitment, volunteerism and stuff like that. To see somebody with 35 years of service retired. They dedicated, you know, numerous hours a week for training, for emergency responses. I wasn't sure if Mary Ann was gonna come, but, you know, even your support, Mary Ann, your wife, you know, we want to thank her on behalf of, obviously, not just the township council, but every firefighter for your assistance throughout the years. Ken's been the go-to guy. He's always, you know, always at calls, his attendance is excellent. And we have, the way the province and the federal government works is we can apply for Ken's 35-year bar. The challenge is it takes about 6 months to get, so we have applied for it, Ken. So in the interim, we would like to present you with this certificate that recognizes your retirement, but also your 35 years, and when your medal and your bars get in, we'll definitely get it to you. But I just want to say thank you for everything. Thank you for public safety, and we do appreciate everything you brought to the fire service. Yeah, so again, thank you.
So, also on behalf of, on behalf of the people of Southwest Oxford, thanks for your service. You've seen a lot in 35 years. When you started, we were still actually just doing fires. And, you've seen kind of the development and, evolution of, kind of a more emergency response. May not have been what you signed up for originally, but it kind of evolved. And I appreciate very much sticking with it. And quite frankly, if you ever go to any event, then Mile and Barrel is putting on, Ken's been there. I don't know if they've ever been to something that you haven't been there for. And that's kind of the camaraderie, the, you know, the fellowship of, fellow people. You recognize it isn't just at training or just at, emergency event, it's about, kind of that holistic, we need to operate and think as a community, so deeply appreciate that. Well, Jane may say it's a sad day when you retire. I'm a follower of the philosopher Ecclesiastes, and he says that for everything there's a season. There's a time to come when there's a time to go. And I honestly believe in that. That's, I mean, one of my principles is that everything, there's a season, there's a time for everything under the sun. And I think that in my mind, it isn't the fact that you came or that you left. It is the gift that you gave to the community for that 35 years. And 35 years is all long. And so I deeply appreciate that. And on behalf of Southwest Oxford, I hope that the next step, the next journey you take, even though it may not include the fire service or emergency services, may it be a wonderful and blessed opportunity for you to go forward. So, a very, very sincere thank you. Well, any other comments from council, you're welcome to make. Thanks very much, Ken, and your bar is coming, and all Julie wants a picture. Okay.
Should have introduced Chief Wilford here too, but everybody knows him. Sure.
I could, imagine how.
Actually, I gotta squeeze in here, because, Jason can, go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you know, hopefully it's nice. Hopefully it's fine. Anyways.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for coming in.
Yeah.
Okay, so. Charlie, well, she doesn't mind waiting for a few minutes, so we're gonna go back to, the fire master plan. And, Rick, if you don't mind coming back up, so that's, people have thought of new questions, because if they haven't, I'll keep going. Earlier, there was a bit of a comment around, paramilitary and kind of chain of command. In your conversations, you raised the issue of, are all the voices heard? I'm wondering, how do we encourage, the voices being heard, and the communication really isn't just, the firefighters speaking to the, captains or the district chief or to the chief, but making sure that the conversation actually then goes the other way as well, right? That they're acknowledged, that they're heard, and that, there's, the goes to respected. But I just wondering, any comments on that, because I would, from the outside, I would say that my expectation is that the chief, the district chiefs, the captains and all that, should be, and I'm expecting that they're having these conversations all the time, so. The fact that it shows up in the plan suggests that there's room for improvement. But frankly, I just wondering what your thoughts on that would be.
Mr. Mayor, thanks for the question. Yes, I mean, it is being done. The chain of command, which is still paramilitary and it's still needs to do that, but life has changed and voices want to be heard. So they want to make sure that when it goes up, it comes back down. Sometimes life gets so busy and you're so busy doing your job and all the jobs you have to do, you don't always get that opportunity to come back and give that response that is needed to be given. So those kinds of things are, and the communication, we can always improve in communication, and I think it's just a communication issue that you just need to improve a little bit on the communication to make sure it's flowing both ways.
So despite the fact that we have, access to, communication with anyone, anytime around the world, we still don't communicate very well. But, all right, one of the other issues you raised was around inspections. And, I'm a firm believer of the provincial hierarchy, start out with prevention, then you make sure that you're enforcing all the rules, and finally you get down to, oh shoot, somebody made a mistake, and we know have an incident, a fire or actually. So, I'm just wondering, on the inspections, you say high risk annually, how close are we to that? And, with a shared full-time sort of person, do we need to double that? Are we relatively close? What are we doing?
Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question. You're doing the minimum, all right? You're still hanging right around the minimum portion, and that's because the shared person is doing more than one community. What needs to happen is you need to expand, and I guess an example of that was in my former career. I did a presentation to council regarding a block that caught fire and burnt to the ground. We were getting, at that point prior to the fire, we hadn't done our due diligence. We were skipping inspections and not doing them on a regular basis, you know, every couple of years instead of every year. This place caught fire, burnt to the ground. We were collecting out of that little area somewhere in the vicinity of $35,000 or $40,000 annually because of the businesses, taxes. Once it burnt to the ground and made it a parking lot, it went down to $1,500. I don't think today in reality, we can afford to lose that kind of tax dollars. I mean, as any municipality. So if we can enhance the fire prevention and public education and stop fires before they happen, it ensures that your tax dollars will always be there. Right, so that's kind of where you are. Where you are is you're still just above the minimum line. You're getting the minimum done a little bit more than that. But I think expanding on that would probably in the future. Again, your master plan is over the next 10 years, and you were just talking about growth. And as your municipality grows, then you may need to enhance your fire prevention portion of the business more at that point. So I think it's just a continual consideration of where you are and what's going on, what businesses are coming, and enhance as you go.
So I'm probably interested in inspections because I'm a firm believer in financial prevention for public care. And I would agree. We'd say if we had done something yesterday, we might have prevented practically today. So, and that's where the recommendation doesn't bother me at all. It's a case of wanting to make sure that we're actually heading in the right direction. So I'm pretty sure Shane's picked up on that. So the other one that you talked about was and was mentioned earlier was about personal protective equipment in vehicles. And Councillor Way raised the issue, I think it was about how long do you wait before you send a fire truck out? And that because we have people dispersed across the municipality, there's a certain number of people that will drive by the fire to get to the fire station and or drive, it would be much quicker for them to go to the fire than it is. And so balancing the risk of you know, trying to get there as quickly as possible versus the risk of contaminated equipment in someone's vehicle. Like there's, that's, in my mind, that's kind of a, maybe if somebody showed up or if the truck showed up 3 minutes earlier, you might have saved a life, although I would argue that so far, and I'm sure somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, we've never lost a life because of a fire in Southwest Oxford in the last, since I've been on council. I mean, to me, that's great. That's some, not necessarily a reason to celebrate it, but it is a bit of good news in somewhat a troubling area. So, but anyways, I do wonder about, and I think Councillor Way raised it about what's the most effective and efficient way. And is there other alternatives to having equipment in a person's car if they can go to the fire? And I mean, I make this up, so laugh at me, but is there such a thing as a bag that you can put all your stuff in, seal it up tight, and when you get to the scene, so that it doesn't contaminate someone's car, or you just don't get into your car with all your equipment on it after a fire or something. Anyways, those kind of options that would maybe be kind of a middle of the road, the most efficient time to the scene versus the risk of creating a situation where I don't want my car contaminated if my grandchildren are going to be in the toilet that way. So I'm just wondering, like, what are the other, because across the province, as you said, we're pretty typical. So I'm assuming that this happens, especially in some of the more remote areas, that everything goes on the car and they're 15 minutes to the closest fire department or whatever. So anyways, comment.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Mayor. there is alternatives, and I think alternatives need to be left up to, the chief and his district chiefs to come up with some ideas. Is there things you can do? There's people that do not work in the community during the day period, they're not gonna be able to get there. Even, in their personal vehicle in any sort of time anyway. But if you have those individuals that either work on your state public works department or work in the community and there are ways, do you store their gear on the fire truck instead of hanging it in the fire station? So the fire truck gets there, and when the fire truck gets there, the firefighter gets there, he or she can put their gear on at that point, right? So the issue, again, the next issue, and you do cover part of the 401 here, correct, chief? Right? You don't want 10 vehicles on the 401 plus your fire apparatus. I mean, I don't know if you've ever stood on the 401 at an incident, but it's changed over the years. But my early career, I used to hang on to the panel, because as the trucks went by at 60 mile an hour, they suck you into the road, right? And they don't slow down. And once you get the more vehicles, the more congestion, whether it's on the 401, on a local road. If your tankers are coming in and out, again, it makes more congestion. It makes it harder to get the water in and out. So, I mean, there's lots of balancing that you have to look at, but can there be things? Sure, they sell gear bags, but I don't think the gear bags really protect it from the carcinogens that would off gas from it. Plastic bag could work, and I guess what you have to do is, do you have specific people that you need to look at trying to do that for? And I think for the balance of it, most of your gear could probably be stored in the fire hall, and they respond to the hall and then go. But there's always the one-off that you might be able to do something to integrate and make sure that you're getting the gear to the scene at the same time that they need to get there, right?
You discussed a couple of things around water supply and tandem trucks and that, and actually, just the way the weekend worked out, I read the whole thing. I read the whole report, made a few notes, but in thinking about it and trying to be as cost effective as possible, whether it be, Superior Shuttle, that kind of thing, or whether it be increasing the number of reservoirs we have in, certain municipalities or certain built up areas, for example. So in my mind, we did a pretty good job in Brownsville, Beachville, and Mount Elgin as far as water supply, or will have, when trying to get the next, I don't think the second water tank isn't operating in Mount Elgin yet, is it? Is it? Okay, good. So we have that kind of capacity there. That's a good step. Then you start saying, well, what about the other villages? And would we be further have to have a water supply, cistern there, or would we further had to truck it in? To me, that's a management problem, and happy to let Shane and the district chiefs figure that one out. But it is one of those things where you sort of say that the number of ways of solving this problem, what's the most cost effective and efficient for delivering of the service the day you need it, right? So anyways, there's a whole lot to that. Finally, and now that my computer's on sleep here, the recommendation, Shane, this is to Shane, the recommendation in your report is to adopt. And I'm still struggling with the priority of things. I think it was raised earlier about Councilor Gillis suggested that we're already working on a number of these issues, the third of these issues. I would suggest that some of them are ongoing, they'll never be completed. I.e. retention, communication, sort of trying to improve the quality. But I guess I'm wondering, and Shane, I don't wanna throw you under the bus here, but I'm wondering about what the priority of the department would be. And I realize we have two captains or district chiefs here, sorry. What their priority would be as to inform council and for example, their priority might be A, but council may say, actually, we better solve the documentation problem. Like kind of a universal documentation before we worry about getting, A, B, or C, whatever is coming up, right? So I'm just wondering how you see that working out, as in, rather than adopting, just receiving this report and then saying, Shane, come back with a report that tells us what you and whoever you think you need to kind of guide you, gives us a set of priorities. And because quite frankly, most of this report will not be done by this council, it'll be done by the next council. Yeah, but setting priorities, and this council has enough experience to be able to say yes, and that makes sense. So, I don't know your thoughts on that.
Through you, Mayor. Yeah, so first of all, I'd like to thank Rick and his team for putting the report together. They did a lot of work, as did everybody in this room. They did a fantastic job when it came to the engagement piece. And then, as I said right from the beginning, this isn't Shane Caskinet's master fire plan. This is actually Southwest Oxford's master fire plan. And it needs to be developed from, the ground up, so to speak, with consultation from many stakeholders. The reality is that what I like about this report or any master fire plan as a fire chief is it basically gives me my work plan for the next 10 years. And to your point, Mayor, it is a plan that should be at least looked at annually to see if it's still relevant. Every 5 years to make sure, we didn't get a battery energy storage system or something new that changes, the community risk assessment. So that we can look at this and continue to grow with it. So what I like about it is, whether it's Shane Caskinet sitting in this seat or the next chief or, whatever happens, there's a plan so that, there is succession planning. We know here's the roadmap to our future, and it's, so to speak, the guiding principles or the planning points that we want to achieve over the next 10 years as a group. Where I see some of the challenges, and then Rick pointed them out, was in order to get some of the data sets, and Rick mentioned it, if a firefighter arrives on scene and says, hey, I'm on scene, that stops the clock for the actual apparatus of getting there. So the challenge is to figure out, your point, how do we capture the data so that we're reporting out on what we should be reporting out on, our response times, the number of people on scene, and accurately doing that. Today, I would probably say it needs some improvement to there. So I wouldn't say you look at it and, this versus this. I think, you kind of move along with many of the objectives at the same time. And to one of the counselors saying, we have begun to move on some of the issues that we know that are issues. So I think it's that comprehensive approach to dealing with it. Sitting down with staff now that we've, council's digested the document and said, hey, here's the priorities, which ones, what's the low hanging fruit? What are the quick ones, or some of the more lengthier ones where we have to report back to council and say, here's what we're thinking, what does council think? So I do look at it as a multifaceted approach, but I will say that the recommendation isn't for council to say, hey, you know what, I'm approving this, and that's why we use the word adopt. You're not approving this. This is just, you're adopting it as the framework for the next. Anything that's gonna cost council money or consideration will have to come, usually it comes within the annual report, say, pick any of the recommendations that require council consideration on, that would come back at an annual through the budget deliberation process, and we'd say, hey, this is what we're looking to do. You know, it was identified in the master fire plan, you know, the chiefs, the deputies, and that we support this project going forward. It's ultimately up to council who determines the level of service. So that's why the report recommendations are structured the way they are. I hope that answers the question.
Any further questions? I don't want, go ahead, Councillor. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I think back to, well, first of all, reading through the report, one of the recommendations is to do a lot more pre-planning of structures and especially industrial structures. When I go back 20 years during my time on the department, it was something that was often talked about, but seldom done just due to time constraints. And I don't know whether Chief, whether you want to comment on that or whether Rick is the one to comment on that, but how do you see being able to accomplish that goal, given the constraints on volunteer time? Is that something that could be done as an administrative personnel to go through and do some of that work and just present plans to firefighters at, say, a training night? Or is that actually you have to walk through, pardon me, actually have to walk through the building and see it for yourself?
Well, through the mayor, do the question, and then you can jump in if you'd like. So when it comes to pre-planning, I think it's almost vital that the actual firefighter gets through there, because that's really what the pre-plan is about. It's not the fire safety inspection, that can be handled from a prevention. But really, it's to familiarize the firefighters with the hazards and risks associated with that property so that they know what to do in the event of it. So to your point, could you know, have a checklist that, you know, a fire inspector, say, when they go through, could do it, you could, but the real benefit and the real emphasis behind the pre-plan is to get our folks exposure to that building, because once it's on fire or there's a disaster or an emergency there, that's not the time when you want to be figuring out what systems are there. And we do it, but we do it in limited fashion. I know we've talked about it at the en route, trying to, you know, buildings where folks go to, trying to set up site visits so people understand the systems, the life safety systems in the building, as well as, you know, where the hydrants are, the dry hydrants or stuff like that. That's the way I look at it, Rick.
Through you, Mayor and Councillor, yes, the chief's correct. And what you look at is, you know, we talked about prevention, public education, you know, this is an enhancement to the prevention program. So, you know, do you expand the duties of a firefighters, you know, which means a couple of more hours here or there, pay them to get some of this stuff done. And as you said, years ago, it was always talked about, but seldom done. And it's something that should be done for firefighter safety. It should be done. So they know the building, they know the facility, and when they go there, it's not a surprise when they get there. So it's all part of, you know, the plan and looking at it. And, you know, there's a lot of moving parts within the plan, right? So, you know, as the chief sees fit, our recommendations may not totally fit to the way the chief manages his fire department. And we understand that when we write a plan, but you know, when it's all figured out, the chief will come up with the best solution and come back to council with his solution on how to do that.
Other questions?
Through the mayor, to you, just a quick question on your inspections. You talked about high risk occupancies and stuff like that. January 1st, we had a new rule come in with carbon monoxide. Is anyone in this province going to inspect houses to see if that's been mandated, or are we just gonna, hopefully that public education will drive that law to be put into place? Like, are we gonna be held accountable if we, you know, like, who's responsible for that?
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Mayor, great question, and my first answer would be, I don't know, but anyway, the province is mandating wholeheartedly, and now they downloaded into the municipalities, right? The same with smoke alarms, that's mandated, they're supposed to be on every level, in front of every bedroom. And do we get to every house and inspect them? No, we don't. There isn't a fire department in the province that does that. But the chief has set up a program, one, when they attend an incident, they will check the smoke alarms to make sure, right? And a municipality, I don't think you wanna go out and fine every person that doesn't have a smoke alarm. But I think when the fire service is there, they check, they make sure, if they don't have it, maybe you provide an alarm for them to use for the time being till they go uptown, buy a new one, bring it back, tell you they got it, and you know, and you've done your due diligence and you made sure that family's safe for the evening. On the CO alarms, you know, again, it's gonna fall on the fire service as they respond to incidents. They're gonna check homes. They do door to door, knock on doors to check smoke alarms, and we'll be checking CO alarms. Again, the person doesn't have to open the door to the fire service when they come and knock on the door, right? You knock on the door and say, I'm here to check your CO and smoke alarms, and they say, we're not interested. And we can't force our way in to do that. But we talked about documentation of stuff. Here's where the importance of the documentation comes in. We went to 123 Main Street, asked to check their smoke alarms, they refused us entry. So if something happened to that home, which is still horrible, you know, and you haven't had that, but if something happened, at least the liability portion of it, you've covered yourself, right? So it's a double-edged sword. I mean, they've made the legislation to do that. To get to that point, it's almost a self-imposed reality for people to do what people don't do, right? I mean, it is what, it's like seatbelts, some still won't wear it, right? And no matter how much you tell them, they're gonna save their life. Right?
Thank you.
Shane, did you wanna make a comment?
Just another follow-up to that point too is, under the FPPA, the owner is always responsible. So the owner is responsible for making sure that, you know, they're compliant with the laws out there. What I have seen in my past is you go to a house with an incident that, say there was a fire. People get fined for not having working smoke alarms. People get fined for not having CO alarms and stuff like that. And so, there's definitely different enforcement measures, but what I can tell you from my experience in Southwest Oxford, when that law changed, we had a number of people call. We posted on social media to try and get out in front of it, to say, hey, what do we need to do to be compliant? You know, and I know we'll send crews out to have a look and help, you know, the residents understand what their requirements are. And for the most part, most people are, that at least from my experience, what I'm hearing is they want to comply. They understand the importance of working smoke and CO alarms, and it truly is very minimal investment for the safety of the households.
Any further questions from council? So, Shane, highly inappropriate, but Bill, have you read the report? Yeah. Anything you would raise, kind of, I realize I shouldn't be asking you, but go ahead and tell us anyway.
No, all the highlights are well put, definitely a focus for the department, so. Please read the report.
Thank you. Any further comments? We have a motion in front of us, and I'm gonna suggest a couple of edits to it. Under the recommendation, rather than adopt the report, I would prefer that we actually just receive the report, and that we probably come back and adopt it in the future. Because in the third, the council director fire chief to develop, I would insert the words, develop a priority matrix and an implementation strategy. Because from my perspective, if you have 51 recommendations, not all of them are going to be adopted or put into place. But other than 51, some are probably more crucial than others. And I'd like to know which ones we're gonna, which ones should we be tackling first? As in importance to the safety of the firefighters, and to the residents, right? To me, that's, and to the liability of the township. So that's where, like, I might come in conflict between documentation and something else, but I think, the chief could provide us with some kind of direction on that, so. But I'm open to whatever council wants to do with this, so. Any, suggestions? Councillor White?
Yes, Mayor, I kind of agree with the word, taking the adopting one out, because if you go further into the report here, when it gets under conclusion, it says that, by adopting the master plan, council is not approving the recommendations, so I think we just receive everything as information, and then as needed basis, we will start improving or accepting the recommendations.
That's kind of where I was.
That's kind of what I'm thinking, so.
Yeah, Councillor Gillis.
So you, Mr. Mayor, are you suggesting that possibly, say, 6 months' time, maybe have a suggestion from staff suggesting some of the points that can be implemented sooner than later, or priorities that fire should be working
I'm thinking less than 6 months.
on? I'm just not supposed.
No, I'm thinking that if you give direction to the chief to say, I want a priority list. And then, an implementation program. Then by September, when budget starts being processed, this should already be in place. I'm assuming Brooke's starting the budget in September or August, whatever. Then, no, but I think if we're gonna actually do it, there's gotta be money in the budget to do it. And some of this stuff may not be budgetary considerations. But some of it may be, and therefore, if you're gonna create a priority list, what's the most important things we need to get done? And then how we can take it. And to me, that kind of needs to flow. So Shane, do you want to just say?
Yeah, through you, Mayor, you got, council will also note that in the report, there are short, medium and long-term priorities that they did recognize in the report that may help drive this too. So I don't see it taking 6 months.
I was being generous, and 6 months probably would bring it to the end of September, so you only have 5 to start out with, so. Anyway, other questions or comments, and then, are we ready to make a motion? So the motion would be. Councillor Yupna.
I would move the recommendations as written with the adjustments that you suggested a few minutes ago.
So we remove the word in the second that council, or sorry, first that council adopt, change that word to receive. And then add, in the next one, that council direct fire chief to develop priority matrix. I'm not sure if that's the exact right word, but you get the idea. And an implementation strategy. Any further discussion? Oh, you gotta move or give a second there. Councillor Wade, any discussion? Councillor Griffith, any comments?
No, I think you're on the right track. I'd like to see an action plan or something with each recommendation.
I think implementation strategy would be an action plan or a proposed action plan, so. Okay, anything further? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's good. So Rick, thanks very much for all the work you put into it, I really appreciate it. It's usually a good idea to have somebody on the other side look in and say, you know, you're doing it right, you're doing it wrong. Overall, my sense was that you're relatively satisfied with the way things are going. And a few minor tweaks, but a few major tweaks as well. That's fine with me. If we're perfect, we wouldn't need to do any of those, so. So, okay, thanks very much.
Thank you,
And
Mayor.
we'll no doubt be in touch at some point in the future, so.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Okay, now we're back to our 10:15 appointment. And it's only 11:21. So, Laurel.
Time change it this weekend, so I'm sure that factor depends on.
Who?
Jim, just letting you, Jim.
Oh, right, Jim had to leave, so. Let's do the draft, terms of reference. Go ahead and lead us through this.
Great, thank you, Mayor Mayberry, members of council and staff, and Megan, thank you for staying. You're welcome to move up if you'd like.
Yeah, why not, Mayor? What part of the conversation?
Yeah. So, given Megan's excellent presentation and how she, integrated the forthcoming secondary plan, into it, I think there's a lot of things to discuss. So what I've presented you with is a draft terms of reference for Village of Mount Elgin settlement area boundary review, which Megan did touch on, and secondary plan study. So I'd like to emphasize this is a draft terms of reference. It has been looked at, reviewed by a few staff members in the county planning department. Julie has taken a look at it as well. Our housing department has taken a look at it. It still needs to be reviewed by Public Works, and it needs to be further augmented with a few things, including what Megan is talking about with the growth entrance study. So, next slide, please. Not sure where the computer is. So, as I presented last year, and as Megan, I almost called you Melgan, that's the combination of Mount Elgin and Megan. Mount Elgin is experiencing growth and expected to experience higher levels of growth and development, resulting in significant change. And we've talked about this over the past year. There's interest from the township and from the county in understanding how the township can develop a community-specific direction and tools for managing growth and development. So essentially coordinate future development and decisions with a shared vision, shared goals, and shared objectives that are all clearly articulated. And this will provide a long-term and very community-specific direction. In the terms of reference, and I'm not going through the terms of reference verbatim, but in the terms of reference, I did include opportunities and issues that have been identified to date by council and by some senior staff as well. And I'll just highlight those for you. Oh, sorry, next slide. So access and transportation, specifically, how to deal with Highway 19, the village straddles Highway 19. How do we work with MTO to ensure that physical division is incorporated appropriately into the secondary plan? How do we incorporate active transportation and connections for both active transportation and vehicular transportation as well? We've talked about affordable housing, so small footprint housing, different forms of housing, and through Megan's conversation, we talked about those intensification, other forms of housing, how to incorporate those as well. Business retention, expansion, and attraction. So what are the opportunities for expansion and for new businesses within the village of Mount Elgin? There is a desire to create a unique sense of place and identity. So a core or a main street within Mount Elgin, what is the appropriate place for that? Is it appropriate to develop that, and what does that look like? The industrial lands, right now, the industrial lands, the designation, they are to the north of Mount Elgin. Through this study, we'll look at, is this the right location for it? Is there another location that would be more suitable? And then we've talked about new investment, new development, and population growth, which was essentially what Megan discussed in her presentation as well. Essentially, how do we incorporate that into what level? Next slide, please. So the overall goal of the study is a comprehensive vision and community-specific land use policy direction for the village of Mount Elgin. So what does that mean? There's two key components that we're suggesting: a settlement area boundary review. So looking at the appropriate location and extent of any boundary expansion or reconfiguration. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an expansion, it could be moving the boundary, so same land area, but just shifting where the settlement area is, required to accommodate future growth and development. The second key component is a secondary plan. So that's the strategic and consistent framework to guide and evaluate future development and public realm projects and improvements, providing policies and recommendations to direct development within the settlement of Mount Elgin. Next slide, please. I've included the overall goals and objectives for the the studies. So the overall goal again is to create a secondary plan that will lead to a vibrant, complete, sustainable, and resilient rural settlement area, while also striving to protect surrounding agricultural lands and protect and enhance the natural environment. So part of the discussion this morning, when Megan was presenting, was that overall question of how do we accommodate growth and new development while still preserving, enhancing, protecting the agricultural lands that are so important to not just this community, but communities across Ontario and Canada. So the overall study goal is to try to balance those things. The overall objective, create a secondary plan that provides a strategic and consistent framework to guide and evaluate future development and public realm projects and improvements, provide policies to direct and guide the development of lands and land. So as we talked about last year, a secondary plan can provide a finer grain of detail than you see in the official plan. So the official plan has very general policies and guidelines for settlement areas. A secondary plan would provide that finer grain that would say, in this area, we're looking at intensification of this scale and this density. We're looking at mixed use in this area. So it's just that finer level of detail that provides the township the ability to guide development in a way that they see fit for the township. Next slide, please. So what would be involved in the draft term in the study? So I've listed some of the key components here, and after listening to Megan's discussion and your questions to Megan, I think there's opportunity and need to probably enhance this. So we would be evaluating existing land uses and development within and adjacent to the village. So basically looking at what exists, revisiting existing land use designations. So looking at where residential is supposed to occur, where the industrial lands are supposed to occur, the service commercial, and revisiting that and saying, are these the appropriate locations for what we want to see in Mount Elgin moving forward? Is there a better place for industrial lands to be, for example? When they look at the settlement area boundary, if they are proposing a settlement area boundary expansion or reconfiguration, we will need to understand why that is. Why are they recommending a boundary expansion or reconfiguration in a certain area? We will have policies to guide future public investment and development in a coordinated way. So again, that's where that finer grain of the secondary plan comes in. It enables staff to respond to development inquiries and proposals so that things are more coordinated than at the official plan level. The study will also engage community members, property owners, developers, and other interested parties, and it will result in a secondary plan that's very easy to interpret and implement. So these are the key components that we're looking for in the study. Next slide, please. So we're proposing that the study includes a project team, which would include Oxford County staff, so myself and other key staff, Township of Southwest Oxford staff. I believe Julie would probably be the lead from the township and possibly other staff. There will be a technical advisory committee, and that's typically made up of individuals from different departments, possibly different agencies as well, that would provide review and comment throughout the process and help guide the process as we go forward, and then the consultant team. The study would also involve community engagement and information sharing. That's really important of this type of study, to ensure that we're capturing people's not just stakeholders in the community, but also key stakeholders, so key agencies, capturing their objectives, ensuring that we're including all the perceptions and the perspectives about Mount Elgin. So we would have a project webpage, we would have specific project information, so frequently asked questions, community information meetings, stakeholder meetings, so specific meetings with specific stakeholder groups, so agricultural groups, for example. And then Julie and I have talked about including some specific township initiatives to engage people out at a very local level. In terms of deliverables, we are suggesting that we have a draft Mount Elgin secondary plan, that there is a completed settlement area boundary review that provides a recommendation.
assessing whether or not a settlement area boundary expansion or reconfiguration is required. And through this overall study, supporting studies would be required, and Megan did touch on that as well. So planning justification, cultural heritage and archaeological, natural heritage and natural hazards, agricultural impact assessment. So if we are looking at a boundary expansion into the agricultural area, we would have to appropriately assess that and determine that we are not, that it's the appropriate spot to expand. Assessment of infrastructure and public service facilities, and Mayor Mayberry, you touched on that earlier. Servicing strategy and the financial impact assessment of all of these proposed recommendations. Next slide, please. So in terms of next steps, we're proposing that township and planning staff finalize the terms of reference. As I mentioned, there are a few more steps in that. So consulting with both internal, external agencies. And through Megan's study, there are a number of things to include in it, and obtaining feedback from this council about this terms of reference. Following finalization of that, we would initiate the secondary plan process, which would include issuing a request for proposals and then retaining the necessary consultants. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions.
Good, thanks very much, Laura.
You're welcome.
So, there's a bit of explanation to council. I had talked to planning staff about, the need for council to kind of have input into, any concerns, and so we wait till the draft plan is sort of complete, or do you kind of interject partway through? So this is what we're kind of doing today, is kind of interjecting partway through to make sure that your concerns were heard before they sort of finally nail down something that says, okay, this goes out for an RFP. And so whether we should have had this 2 weeks ago or 2 weeks from now, I don't know. But I do know that at some point we need to kind of contribute to, is there any concerns in here you have? Having seen kind of the, let me call it the rough draft, because it does need to kind of go back for a little more granular sort of discussion and planning stuff, I'm sure. Any comments or questions, having real in terms of reference that was provided, and in this presentation, anything you want to add to it? And if you're looking for a starting point, you flip back to the goals, or the goals presentation.
In the presentation we just saw.
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
My
Is that
my
the,
way of thinking, the goals was probably the most important thing for our council to be comfortable with. To say,
do you want me to go to?
no, the presentation was just, you had to
You want me to
discuss
start?
it. That section to me was kind of the highlight. That's what I wanted to be sure of the most, was how I actually get to the goals. Whether we adjust here or there, I don't care. What I do care about is that at the end of the day, you've actually accomplished what you really wanted to accomplish, and just put down about 2 pages. Right there.
There it
So-
is.
That's the one that. I wanted to see the verbal sort of part of it is that vibrant, complete, sustainable, resilient rural settlement area. And then, what does that actually look like when a consultant's done with it? I don't know, but I know what I think that means, and that's what I was, so I'm really happy with that part. That was the part I was most concerned about, so I just want to open it up to other council members if anything in the terms of reference or in the presentation and sort of sticks out. So I don't have to walk the council further. Go ahead, Laura.
And through you, Mayor Mayberry, and to council. This is a draft document. And this goal and how we get there, so what the objectives are that will fulfill that goal, what the tasks are that will implement the objectives, will be further defined and fleshed out through this study. But this is meant to be the overall vision for what you see as Mount Elgin, is vibrant, complete, sustainable, resilient, settlement area. And protecting the agricultural lands and the natural, so. Again, the objective, so people may have, more to add to that. That would probably be in the objective or the task area, how we get there, but this is meant to be that overarching vision for everything.
So, any comments or thoughts? Councillor,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Laura, basically, when you look around the table, most of us are career farmers. Can recognize a decent piece of ground from, you know, the highway going at 80 kilometers an hour versus something that's not so great. So my question is, when you consider land uses, zonings, all those sorts of things that are currently in place versus where it might be more appropriate, are you going to consider agricultural productivity potential of the areas that you're looking at, soil quality, all that sort of thing, versus, you know, what works best for servicing or providing, you know, the water and wastewater services to an area? You know, if that might be more easier to do in one segment around Mount Elgin versus another, but maybe that's better quality land than another. So is that all going to be taken into consideration as part of the study?
Through you, Mayor Mayberry, thank you. It's a great question. And yes, if we are looking at, and part of this study recommended, part of this study is the settlement area boundary review. And/or so reconfiguration or expansion. So part of that would be conducting an agricultural impact analysis, so an AIA. Part of that is looking at exactly that. Is it appropriate to expand there? So looking at the soil quality, looking at the productivity and the agricultural land, so here versus here. So taking all those into consideration. And I'm happy to add more supportive language in the terms of reference to do that. And I think in talking with Megan and the policy team and other people on the planning team, we will ensure that that's very, very.
so I think, go ahead.
No.
But to say, I think, from my perspective, if I were looking at it, I would say the northeast quadrant of Mount Elgin is less desirable than, say, the southwest or the southeast quadrant. I think there's, I mean, from an agricultural land perspective, right, as a farmer, I would say it's all pretty good land, but the northeast quadrant isn't quite as pretty good as the rest of it. So that would be kind of an example of, and maybe being the highest area, maybe the most easy to service, or if, in other ways, maybe the most difficult, right? But it's, I think Councillor Nittman was going is balancing that, make sure that we get the maximum efficient use of whatever land we have, and that we use, not trying to put words in your mouth, but use the least efficient land first. So anyway, sorry, you want to ask a question?
Well, I guess you know, having represented the area for almost 8 years now, the number one concern about the residents of the village right now is the traffic, right? You reference at the highway and how it divides the community almost in half. Are alternate routes of transportation going to be considered in terms of this, or will this report give us further support in going after the MTO in order to affect changes to that segment of road such that it becomes more safe for the residents? I've had somebody suggest to me that perhaps we should have a roundabout in Plank Line at Graydon Drive and another one on the north end of the village, which would basically segment a section of the village off and by mechanical measures force people to slow down. Another thought that occurred to me, could we turn Duffy Line into a full load road and make that as a community bypass? Some of those sorts of things, is that all going to be looked at as well?
Very, I do, big questions. I do have a meeting booked with the MTO next week on the 10th to talk about scope. And they're involved in this because they're a key partner in it. And one of the comments on the draft is that we do need to look at a transportation component of this. And I believe that, yes, these things can be incorporated into that if that's what the township would like to see. And I've heard loud and clear about the concerns about the traffic, the speed of the traffic, the fact that it divides the village essentially into two. So yes, that can definitely be incorporated.
Other questions, on the terms of reference, anything you want added or subtracted from it, I'm pretty happy with the way it is, so thanks for that, but anything else anybody's thinking of? Nope. So, a couple of questions, and you mentioned right off the bat, Laurel, about a shared vision when you're doing your presentation. And my question about it is, who's sharing, right? And my desire wouldn't be it's just staff or just council or just the loudest voices in the village, but in fact, how do you make sure that we encourage people to share their vision of where they want their community to go? So I'm just wondering, you talk about public engagement. Historically, public engagements in Mount Auburn haven't been overly well attended. But I think this one might attract more that, we're thinking of doubling the size of Mount Auburn. That ought to get some people out of the woodwork. But anyways, I think it's important though that we recognize the current population and the future population, and that's far more difficult to actually gauge the vision of the future when they're not there yet. But anyway, I just wondering, any thoughts around shared vision and who's sharing and
Through you, Mayor Mayberry, I've had a fair amount of experience in education, communication, and engagement, and I truly do enjoy it. I've found it helpful to ask people how they wish to use the space or use an area, not what they want it to look like, but how they want it to feel, how they want to use it. So I think asking the right questions through engagement is really important. So asking people, how do you want to use the space? You want to be able to walk, you want to be able to feel safe, you want to be able to live there, shop there. Those contribute to the shared vision. And then there's a lot of different tactics we can use. So there's the traditional community public meetings, which people may or may not wish to attend. Julie and I talked about utilizing some things at the local level. So walking tours, for example, are a way of having people identify things that they like, things that they prefer in the village, things that they want to maintain. So there are a number of different engagement tactics we can use. And I think Julie and I know Deb, who's been recently hired, has experience in communications as well. So there are a lot of avenues we can explore to tap into. So not just property owners, but residents, tenants, business owners, farmers, surrounding property owners. So I see it as a larger group of people, not just, planning staff or township staff.
I have a few dozen questions there. You mentioned about considering where the industrial lands are, and I don't want to say where they should be, but where they might be in the future, and I think that, in my mind, is a pretty significant. I think we really do need to say, yeah, 40 years ago we said this, but today is a new day and a new considerations, and if the village is going to grow to, X size, we need to kind of reconfigure where we're going to put stuff, because it doesn't actually make sense to have industrial right there, or maybe it does, but I'm just saying, to me, I was glad to see the kind of potential redesignation as being on the table. And the other one that I'm particularly interested in, obviously, is the financial impact analysis. And that goes back to earlier comments to Megan, but at what point do we grow big enough that we simply say, and the next step becomes outrageously expensive? And I think of Waitwell now. And so, but having a financial analysis of it may in fact say, well, yeah, it's gonna be outrageously expensive, but for the next, 500 homes or whatever, it'll actually be very doable, and if it's not sustainable, I mean, if it becomes so expensive to live there that people can't afford to live there, then we're in trouble, right? And that's where, I think this is shared by a lot of municipal politicians, that they're getting a little worried about how expensive development charges are and all this sort of stuff. Does it make the community just not very attractive? And but that's, to a certain extent, some of us might say, That's fine with me, because I didn't want the people moving into my community anyways. So, you know, like, I didn't want to see the population grow and move out in further into rural areas, so, anyway. I think most of that's captured, but I did want council to have the opportunity to add any comments, so. Any final comments on this? And I don't want to keep. What about state prevention? Go ahead.
And for your memory, council, there's still opportunity to provide feedback to me. You can email me directly or email Julie and she'll forward it to me, so this isn't the last chance to provide feedback.
Go ahead.
What's the overall timeline for the project again, Laura?
I need to speak with Megan about timing, just because of the growth, how the growth management study got deferred, so we want to make sure that we're properly coordinating with that. My goal would be to get the terms of reference out in the second quarter of this year. But Megan and I do need to confirm, but I can report back to him soon.
Right, so the other thing is, named council potential. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna go, we will have to talk a bit about the timing of the election with this, Lane Duck Council in terms of procurement and the cost of what it's gonna be. But also likely, this isn't going to be completed and approved by this council. But this is gonna carry into 2027, so we'll chat more about that.
I think that's important. I think, this council may in fact approve the terms of reference, in fact, I'm sure that the proposals are. And the go ahead with the, and I don't know how long the study will take, 6 months or more.
I anticipated it would be a
12 months.
12.
So obviously this council may not have anything to do with it,
Correct.
but it would be nice to have it kind of moving forward. And so that would, thank you for raising that. That would, in my mind, sort of say, okay, then back up, what's the last possible date that you can say, we'll approve that RFP.
And through your memory, Mary, there will be plenty of opportunities to provide input through engagement and consultation through the project, so this council can still very much be involved. And I would be really happy to see them.
Okay. Councilor Gillis.
Through you to planning, just a question, about housing types and intensification. Is that more of a dictation of what council's desire for a plan of this is, or a suggestion the plan come out of areas where it might suggest, different types of housing or intensification within that area?
Through your memory, Mary, if I'm understanding you correctly, I think through this study and through the secondary plan, they would recommend potential areas where intensification would make sense. Not dictate form necessarily, but it would be, here is opportunity for intensification, and then the zoning would dictate. Does that answer the question? Thank you.
Okay, anything else? So my final question was, when someone, consultant is chosen, do they have enough latitude to sort of say, we don't actually, you know, I didn't think of a nice way of saying this, we don't actually care what the municipality says, this is what we actually think makes the most sense in this setting. So I'll give you an example. Municipality may say, we want a 3 or 4 story apartment building, here or in this area. And he might say, no, actually, it should be a 12 story. You forget about the rules, but I'm just exaggerating. Or, yeah, we might put up with 1 apartment building, but they might say, no, actually, you need 4 apartment buildings, or like, I don't need 4, but I mean, kind of this much capacity for apartment buildings, so that's 1 12 story, it might be 4 3 stories, whatever. But do they have that kind of latitude? Because the last thing I want to do is tell the expert in the room what the answer is when I don't even probably fully understand the question. And that's kind of where I want to make sure whoever the consultant is knows that they can come forward. We may not agree with it or approve it. I'm just saying, as long as they feel it.
Yeah, through you, Mary, it's a great question, and I think by providing them with some key principles that this council and staff have articulated, so affordable housing, connectivity, transportation, et cetera. That provides them with sort of a general framework, and we'd be looking to the consultant based on their expertise to provide the most appropriate recommendation or recommendations, and we'll fine tune this through the terms of reference, but we'll probably be looking for two overall concepts for a secondary plan, and there will be a number of discussions with staff as well, but we are expecting them to come forward with their best recommendation, unhampered. Except by, hampered by, you know, practical things like where the significant woodlands are, you know, issues like that, but, we would expect them to make the best case for intensification.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, thanks very much, Laura, appreciate this, and, thanks, Megan, I'm guessing that was lunch for you. But, okay, potentially, so we'll break for lunch in about 10 minutes, so you're certainly welcome to stay, and I'm sure it's excellent to get a pie today. Probably not, so I might go out to lunch anyway, but, certainly welcome to stay. I think we're actually, down now to, staff reports. There are a couple of staff reports in the break. Building department. Daniel, how are things in the building department? This is your first kind of official, all on your own report, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, things are good. No, for January, it was a pretty decent month for January, a lot of demolition permits issued for some reason, but I mean, we had a couple big, agricultural bargains, the one in January issued, and so I'd say for this time of the year, we're off to a good start. And, yeah, that's all I really have to add.
Okay, any questions for Daniel on this report? So you're, go ahead, Councilor Gill.
Just a question, Danny, of the development targets. Those buildings being agricultural, is that why they're all exempted?
Yes.
Any other questions? So Daniel, great start. If we can get $22,106.46 in building permit fees every month, I'll be well pleased.
Yeah. Well, February's been fairly good too, so maybe not 22, but close. Yeah.
Yeah, February's over, too bad.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, okay,
Yeah.
anything further on this report? Seeing none, thank you, Councilor Gillis, moved by Gillis, seconded by Dietmar. Results of County Town of Cliffs of South Pursuit Report BDO 3/2026, January 2026, building reports information. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's great. And building report, 4, year end.
So, yeah, 2025 was, we didn't quite make the budgeted permit revenue that we anticipated, so that's why we lowered it for 2026. We're anticipating a similar year, I would say, for 26 as 2025 was. Other than that, yeah, 124 building permits were issued, $21 million, it's over $21 million worth of construction value, and yeah, that's all I will have to add.
Good. Any questions or comments from council? My comment would be very quickly, this is where you get your one, it's Biden's fault.
Yeah.
Excuse and after that, I'm not getting it anymore, all right? So, do we have a motion on the recommendation? Moved by Brookner, seconded by Wade, result of council sent report BDO 4/2026, year-end building report as of December 31st, 2025 with information. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. And drainage report, confirmation of drainage tender for the Salford drain, and go ahead, Daniel, you're out of line.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's closed last week, or no. I can't remember exactly when it closed there, but on the 18th of February. Anyway, yeah, so AG Hater, they haven't done any work for us in a while, but they are a very reputable, drainage contractor. They have completed work in the town in the past. Most recent was the House Curtis drain in 2022 along Cross Roads, and, yeah, the engineer and I both reviewed the tender, and we're recommending that we go with the lowest bid in this project.
Any discussion on this? I don't remember us ever having any trouble with them.
No, they're a big contractor. They're not as bidding on as many of this type of work as they used to, but no, I got no concerns with them.
And that can be done in October,
Yes,
at least by fall, so.
yes.
Okay. Any other questions from council? Seeing none, do we have a motion and to move by way, second by Gillis, resolve the council council special charges to report media for 2026, meeting for 2026. Competition drainage tender for the Sulphur Drain and further the tender submitted by AG Hater contract noted in the amount of $6,284.35 plus HST for the construction of the Sulphur Drain B2. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Passed. And we'll let Adam have a chance. Another old bridge. Yeah.
Thank you. Report WD 4/2026 brings forth the results for the Memorial Bridge tender. This was proposed spearheaded by Zora Township. We are a co-owner of it, so that's why we need approval of this project. It is recommended in the report to award it to WeatherTech Solutions out of Dorchester. They've worked with Zora in the past and also with EZT, and it's recommended if we work with them. Do you have any questions?
Any questions on this? Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Adam. Adam, is this a shared cost project?
It is, yeah. It is well within budget. What, we budgeted 650,000 for this project, and it'll be total all in will be around 445,000, I'm sure.
Any other questions? Isn't it all on our property?
I don't believe so. I believe the split is right there.
So it's, the creek is actually the splitting line, right?
I believe so.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That makes sense. I was just, yeah, I think it's such a tiny little bridge. Anyways, okay. Any further discussion? We have a recommendation or a motion there. Moved by Buckner, second by Gillis, resolve council township council to report WD 4/2026 information. Further, the council will award the tender for the Memorial Bridge reconstruction with WeatherTech Restoration Services Inc. on the amount of $775,600.80 plus local tax. Any further discussion? We none, all those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. And CAO. Really got on Christmas holidays and New Year's. Looking forward to the next, go ahead, tell us about it.
Thank you, Mayor Gregory. The purpose of this report is to bring forward an amended public holidays policy for council's review and consideration. If council recalls, in February 2025, council approved an annual holiday office closure for 2025 and at the same time provided direction to staff to formalize this practice annually through policy. This proposed amendment responds to that direction and is working to establish a clear and consistent framework for our annual Christmas and New Year office closure period. The amended policy reflects the township's past practice over this period of time, including providing advance public notice and ensuring continued availability of management staff for urgent matters. And also the requirement for staff to utilize vacation or time accumulated in lieu for the working days during the office period closure. And then also continuation of essential services that the township provides. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Any questions from council? None? So it says, for staff. But is that outside staff as well?
No, so anything that's considered essential services are not subject to the closure, including like snow clearing.
Okay, so, sorry, go
if there were any, urgent building matters that came up, same thing, if we had to attend those during disclosures, then we do it with staff to make sure that that happens, and then. In the past, my cell phone contact information has been made available publicly for anyone that needs anything that cannot wait during that time.
So this raises two questions. One, do we consider public works? Are they showing up for work every day, or do they get the same holiday, or the same thing? So they don't show up during each week,
Yes, they do.
We don't take it.
They do.
so they're essential staff.
That's
Correct.
You know where this is going. The CEO, the treasurer, the clerk, they're not really essential. Is that what it is? Anyway.
Sorry.
No, I just. This is office closing and all that sort of stuff. But it does kind of create, a situation where, it could create an animosity where, well, wait a minute. There's no snow holiday, why staff show up for work? Like. That's. Not trying to give out any ideas, but it's one of those things where you kind of wonder about, going forward at some point in the future, is that gonna be an issue? Anyways, any thoughts from council? I'm perfectly happy with the ball. And we'll be enough with them. So, recommendation, mover and a secondary, moved by Way, seconded by Bookner. Result, council officers, report CAO 13/2026. Amended public holidays policy, annual Christmas and holiday office closures information, further the council include the amended holiday policy, section 3.6, as presented, the formally established township annual Christmas holiday office closure practice. Any discussion? None, all those in favor? Opposed, that's great. And we'll break for lunch, we'll be back to construction management services, right after lunch. Probably half an hour, I don't know what time it is now, but. Yeah.